Greetings all, this is Hairy Nick.
This is Justin.
How you guys going? And welcome back to the Hangar Bay, our weekly X-Wing list review show here for the channel. Justin, I have you in today because we're going to talk about some Empire stuff. We are talking about the TIE Defender. I think the TIE Defender is now like the most sort of average, expensive little base ship.
Yeah.
Out of everything that got a points increase on small base, I think it's pretty much this and the Fang Fighter.
I was going to say, the Fang Fighter is the only other...
I'm sure I've forgotten something there.
Yeah.
However, comparison to the Fang Fighter, it's gotten a much better push in power level.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I've spoken about this before, it's because they got rid of veteran instincts and pushed the limit. When you do that kind of stuff, we can do so much more with the design, which is really, really cool. Like all my other videos, just a quick shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much for supporting this. If you guys want to get involved with the conversation, jump on the Discord. The Patreon link is down below. We use the Discord to decide all the different archetypes we talk about in these videos. So please, if you want to get involved with that. And also, let's do a quick primer on TIE Defenders and where they're kind of sitting now, because they're in a bit of a weird spot. Up here on the screen is just an example of all the stats. As I was saying, because we don't have push limits, we can give them 5 actions. Which is just really, really adaptive. I mean, there was basically nothing like this in first edition. Like the TIE Advanced prototype has this action bar. The ability to boost barrel roll, evade, and target lock is pretty potent. I'm having that across the board. They've got one more shield than they had in first edition, and now they all have the full throttle ability, which is essentially what TIE X7 was in the first edition, which is nice and powerful. But the elephant in the room is they're a lot more expensive now.
Very much so.
Yeah, for sure.
It used to be that you could run 3 TIE Defenders in first edition.
Yeah, which is kind of like the fix they gave it. It was the way to make it viable because they gave it a lot of stuff in first edition when they first came out, but it just didn't gel. And I think the issues of having pushed the limits and all that kind of stuff meant they had to be a bit more restrained with its design. So far, you've done a bit of experimentation with building this so far.
Yeah.
How have you found that?
I am
trying to balance it out.
At the present moment, I'm running 2 Defender lists. Probably eventually I might start moving into other things as well, but at the present moment, just enjoying the 2 Defender list.
Yeah.
I'm running Outmaneuver as the talent. Realistically, could also be using Duke. Duke is very, very good.
I think Duke always has to be in the conversation with these new guys because they basically always have evade tokens.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is they have the evade action even if they don't do that 3, 4, 5 speed maneuver, which is solid. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's been a couple of times where I've had to do the red 2U and having advanced senses to give myself the evade to begin with.
Yeah, that's another big thing. They don't have modifications, but they have systems, which I've described in the past as just super modifications, basically. They have the same kind of utility in those upgrades, and that means they can take things like advanced sensors and fire control systems and just make them a bit more efficient overall. Just a super efficient platform. Despite the fact they are so expensive, I don't think we have to put a lot of upgrades on them.
No.
But you still could. You still can give them like missiles and stuff, and they're going to perform well. And this is really where the conversation lies. You're talking about building lists with just 2 defenders. We don't know if that's correct meta-wise so far. Maybe it's just 1 and a couple of other ships, or 2 very, 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 very light builds and like an academy pilot. Don't know. This is the conversation we want to have in this video. And we're going to compare basically both of those approaches when we have a look at all these lists. Actually, before we dive into these lists proper, I do want to point out this comment that was left by Joe Mazzoni. And you actually showed us an example of a list and compared it directly to E-Wings on the Rebellion. And this is very interesting. I honestly didn't compare these 2 things until I saw this comment. So thank you for posting this, Joe. But we do have to have a conversation about the points difference between E-Wings and Defenders because they're covering so much of the same ground now. They're both like that massive sort of utility, do-everything ship.
Yeah.
E-Wings on average are more than 10 points cheaper than Defenders. I think around 10, 15 points depending on the platform. Yeah. Which is pretty significant. We have here an example of an E-Wing list that has used the second cheapest generic pilot in the Rogue Squadron Escort. And you can see the kind of upgrades you can give it. You fly alongside Jake Farrell. Jake Farrell's a very interesting pilot moving into second edition compared to an Imperial list where for the same points we have the same sort of level of pilot. They're the second cheapest, again, generic pilot with talent slots alongside an interceptor. And you can see here you can't actually fit any upgrades on.
Yeah.
I'd love it if we could go Duke in this list, but we can't. Oh, there's no room. Yeah. Duke, even on the TIE Interceptor, I think is something worth talking about. But that's another conversation to have. 78 points for this platform alone with the talent slot seems like quite a lot. I think we have to remember as well that having that baked-in ability, it's almost like having all the fixes from first edition sort of in one card, which means we don't have to focus on upgrades as much anymore. That's a common theme in second edition, full stop. But yeah, it is important to work this out and sort of say, hey, are they really this much better than E-Wings? I have a feeling if they don't perform much better than E-Wings, we're going to see like this happen with the points with our next points update. It could be a case of defenders are just a little bit more expensive than E-Wings, maybe not as much. I mean, who knows? E-Wings might not even perform that well, and maybe TIE Defenders will just come down alone. But it is something to think about moving forward. And when that happens, this is going to throw out all the costings and make a lot of what we're going to talk about irrelevant. But that does not matter because we have to have the conversation for the time being. So when they do change, we know why.
Exactly.
Let's talk about some of these lists that have been submitted. In fact, let's talk about this list that you submitted first. Mr. Justin with Colonel Vessery and Canis Ryad, just a 2-defender list.
My list right now that I'm currently running, it's at 197 points, so 3-point bid. Not too bad. And it's Vessery and Ryad. Both of them are running outmaneuver. Vessery is running advanced sensors, and Ryad is running fire control system.
We had a chat before about the validity of running fire control systems on Vessery, and you made a very good point. I thought, well, surely Vessery wants target locks a lot. He's going to get them. Your point was, but he's probably going to get them turn after turn after turn anyway.
Once you've got them, that's it. You're going to keep that target lock on that guy until either he dies or you die.
That's right. So having the one reroll versus just spending the lock over and over again is not that valuable. That's why you've gone for advanced sensors. Advanced sensors on defenders looks really good.
Oh, it's so much fun.
Advanced sensors has a drawback with a lot of other ships because you can't link actions with it. It doesn't matter when you have 5 actions that don't link. In fact, it gives you even more utility. It almost feels like advanced sensors were designed for the defender now, which is crazy because it couldn't take it in first edition. Yes, now I've spoken about outmaneuver in other lists before. I think it's an upgrade that gets better and better the better you fly with it. I think it's a great option on the defender. But we do have to have the conversation about Duke. Is that just better and more consistent?
Well, that's the thing. With Duke, it then gives me an extra 4 points that can put a heavy laser cannon on one of these.
You could put a heavy laser cannon on one. You could put like a homing missile, potentially on even both of them if you really wanted to. I mean, also just chatting about the initiative bid, you have initiative 4 and 4 on 4 on both of them. I don't think it's hugely important to have an initiative bid. The great thing about initiative, as opposed to pilot school from first edition, there are a lot more clashes. So you're more likely to have the situation where your opponent has an initiative 4 ship. Does it matter so much on these? I'd say it does because advanced sensors outmaneuver. But then again, you might choose to go with Duke and then not worry about outmaneuver so much. So
Outmaneuver, although it's 6 points, is amazing.
Yeah, it would be for sure.
It's so fun to just barrel roll into someone and then you're like, lose a die.
Actually, on that conversation alone, I think outmaneuver is better when you have a better bid because you want to make sure that you're flying last. Duke is interesting because it actually works quite well when you're flying first because you definitely want to execute those maneuvers, get that evade token. Which means when you're flying first, your opponent is much less enfranchised to block you. So that's something to think about as well. All these factors here, and maybe from that point of view, you do want fire control on Vessery, save another 5 points. Maybe that's a bit too extreme. A 3-point bid, I feel like, is like the lightest of bids you can have. But initiative 4, it's not hugely imperative. Just a few things to think about. Let's think about this in comparison to the next list that we're going to have a look at, because we also have this list here by Mr. Eric Cologne. Sorry, Eric, I've been pronouncing your name wrong. I do apologise for that. With Vessery and Rex Labrath. And both have Duke and Collision Detector. Rex Labrath also has cluster missiles, which is a great option, by the way, because of his ability to flip damage cards face up. Duke, I think, is just very strong on the TIE Defender. I don't think we have to have too much of a conversation about that. It's always going to give you great value. It means that this always has a soft buff on offense and defense. And when I think about that, this is kind of the build that makes me think, okay, I'm nervous about flying 2 of these with nothing else, but that kind of utility can leverage you over other ships. Collision Detector. What do we think of Collision Detector?
I'm not sure about Collision Detector. I understand how he's coming from it. Doing a Calagran turn over a rock, not having to roll damage, just seems mean.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
But at the same time...
Oh, and then you get your action. You get your evade token, and then you get your other action as well. Yeah.
At the same time, though, you don't necessarily need Collision Detector.
Yeah, and look, this comes down to your personal preference and the way you fly it. Eric, you're probably flying this and going, fly over rocks and that kind of stuff. And if you're able to use it to double guess your opponent, that's always good fun. Cluster missiles is very interesting as well. Just before we move on to the next list, I really dig what this is doing. It gives you utility against swarms. I think defenders, and this is just me guessing, are going to hate swarms. Especially if you've only got 2 ships, no turrets, it just feels rough. Having that utility against swarms, you need to take as many shots as possible. You don't have like Bistan and turrets and stuff like that when using defenders, so it's something we have to talk about. Maybe like Duke and clusters on 2 different defenders, or Duke clusters fire control on cheaper defenders, and stuff like that.
Vessery could already put cluster missiles on that and make it a straight 200.
Yeah, you could do. That's a very good point, actually. Worth thinking about. I like a bid with Rex Labrath because he's initiative 5. Also because you're using Collision Detector, positioning is even more important. That's probably why you're thinking a bit more about a bid. So I completely understand that. Let's keep moving on. One more list we have here with just 2 defenders. This one's by Strider Zasay. I'm sorry if I pronounced that name wrong. Rexler and Ryad, both with Duke, Collision Detector, and cluster missiles, as we were saying before. So instead of Vessery, we have Ryad, and I like that a lot. We're sort of getting more in the territory of arc dodging now. Despite the fact she only has initiative 4, it's going to be great against low initiative ships. And against aces and sort of the more high initiative arc dodgers, it means you have to leverage that unpredictability against your opponent. And just making sure that you can always unlock all of her actions. So this is where that baked-in ability and her ability and Collision Detector really all pay off together. Because you leverage that unpredictability, you always get your evade tokens, you can fly through rocks, get the perfect positions, and you have to like the way that flies. This has to be your preferred way of doing things. Also, I love cluster missiles on both defenders. This time it means you can really deal with swarms, hopefully. I'm not convinced it's the best thing in the world, but at least you have utility to get around that.
Well, Ryad with cluster missiles, that's,
Yeah, for sure. I'm going through a rock, evading, target locking, all that kind of stuff. As long as you're not going through the rock in a way that sets you up to fly through the rock the next turn. I mean, I guess you can use the detector again, but then you've used both charges and it seems a bit wasteful. By the way, we are talking about things that are very theoretical at this point. The design and the power level push in the defenders is pretty unprecedented, especially with Collision Detector and other system or sensors as they're called now. I will just point out that the things we're talking about when it comes to Collision Detector is very theoretical at this point. We don't have enough meta play to really decide how effective it is, but it's definitely worth talking about. I will say a lot of new players tend to like to gravitate towards the spicier things, like Collision Detector, like Outmaneuver. It sometimes bites you in the butt. Just be careful of that. And sometimes the more consistent things are the way to go. I consider myself a bit more of, what we call in Magic, a spike, where we like to worry about the consistency of things and that kind of thing. So it's worth thinking about. And look, if any of you guys who submitted these 3 defender lists, you included, want to talk about how those very specific upgrades work, please let me know in the comments, because I'm very curious about that.
I will post in the comments then.
Excellent. Good man. Good man. Let's talk about some lists that use defenders with other ships to try and sort of balance out the need to just have 2 defenders, and we don't have to worry about having just 2 small ships.
Yeah.
Dead Man Walk. Right. Pure Rex Rain. Great name. Rex Labrath with HLC.
Pure Sabak with Crack Shot and Shield upgrade.
And Death Rain with Trajectory Simulator, Skilled Bombardier, Barrage Rockets, Proton Bombs, and Seismic Charges. Just a quick note before we talk about the Defender. I really like the look of this Death Rain build. It seems very efficient for the points you're investing in.
Yeah.
I've talked about Protons alongside Seismic Charges. Yes, I've changed my mind on it. It's awesome. Skilled Bombardier to give you more options, and then you have the choice of the bomb that it explodes in situ or latches onto a mine. It feels very solid. Barrage Rockets to upgrade the basic attack. Solid, solid, solid. Not so convinced with the TIE Strikers yet. That's something worth talking about. Also, because we're using Pure Sabak and we want damage cards, you want a hull upgrade, not shield upgrade. Just a slight tweak I'd make to this list, so worth talking about there. But yeah, a nice little aggressive ship. Rex Labrath with only HLC. Let's talk about this. We're talking about an 88-point build. 44 points in first edition speak to try to get the mindset correct there.
Which is basically half.
A little bit less than half,
Yeah.
like a tiny bit less. But I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest. HLC is what we want to put out 4 points into.
I like using HLC. I haven't been able to use it just as of yet. In any of my... Whenever I've played, HLC hasn't come into play yet.
And look, I look at this and think this may reflect better the way you choose to fly, but look, this is the spike in me coming out again. It's Duke. The 4 points goes into Duke, not HLC. That's just what I have to say.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the best way to fly. Like, you may find that HLC is just better. You fly in such a way that makes it more consistent. But Duke will always be consistent. And that's what I like about it. And that's just something worth thinking about. I don't think there's anything wrong with this build overall. I love the utility of having a relatively efficient bomber and a relatively efficient ace. I think Rex Labrath does sort of get into the sort of ace range with his baked-in ability and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Which is why, again, I'd lean more into something consistent like Duke. Pure Sabak's interesting. Alongside those 2 other guys, I do like that role. I do like that there is just something getting all up in your space while you have an ace and a bomber on the other side. Doing those 3 roles. You've got to make sure that these guys are firing on all cylinders. It's still a 3-ship build. They still have to be performing well. If one of them just eats it and doesn't do that well, it means that your list is severely lagging behind. Yeah. However, purely in terms of getting Rex Labrath alongside 2 other guys, I like this approach. I think there's tweaking to be done here, but yeah, dig it. Absolutely dig it.
Definitely.
Let's move on to a couple of more lists that use defenders and some other stuff. This one by Catherine Nixera. I do want to point out that we can still get defenders alongside decimators. And when I first saw this, I thought, wow, it almost feels like a defender is worth as much as decimator. I mean, this decimator build cost 106 points. That still feels really good. It's still Re-Admiral Shenru alongside Rex Labrath. They're initiative matched. Rex Labrath build is very efficient. I just love Duke Fire Control System. That is so solid. I can't really fault this build too much. Trick Shot, yep, solid 1 point upgrade. Good with the turreted ship. Director Krennic, Minister Tau for a bit of defense. Seismic Charges, not a big fan of hull upgrade. I think you're just going to lose that hull pretty quick and you're going to regret putting that on there. I just take it off and just put it into the bid. We're on a 3-point bid right now. Take off hull upgrade, you increase that bid. I think that's probably more what you want to be doing.
Yeah, maybe put a missile on Rex Labrath.
Yeah, or maybe upgrade the bomb on Shiranu, although Seismic Charges I'm a huge fan of right now because of the way they clear the board. Could be relevant with Shiranu trying to fly around, but the likelihood of dropping a bomb and then turning around to go back into that space is very unlikely. Yeah, I really like the approach. This is the conversation I want to have about defenders. Do we want to push them all the way up to 100 points, or is like this 90-ish point build just better? Do we want to be more efficient? And I think I look at this and I think, I think like around here is probably more what we want. I'm sorry, Justin. I know you like the 2 defender build, but I look at this and go, I think this is just squeezing out a bit more value. And from the point of view of, for more meta play, I like this, where maybe the 2 defender builds a bit more of a casual kind of build. Not that there's, more or less value in either of those. It's just something that I'm looking at going, I think we just get a little bit more value out of this. Moving on, we have a Colonel Vessery build alongside Marek Steel in the TIE Advanced and Major Rama in the TIE Bomber. Again, just Colonel Vessery with Duke. Vessery gets a lot more value out of his ability when he flies alongside something that wants to take target locks. And we've got Marek Steel in the TIE Advanced, which has that baked-in ability. This just looks really solid. Major Rama has cluster missiles, fifth brother, and munitions failsafe. Very interesting.
Look, with Major Rama and the fifth brother, 12 points, bringing it up to 53 from 34.
It seems like a lot, doesn't it? Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. Force tokens. Force tokens are good. Again, we're talking about more theoretical ground now. Are they worth that much? You do get a bit more offense. My gut tells me if you want to invest in force tokens, you want to have a lot of utility for them. Good offense and good defense. And the bomber does not have good defense, which is why I tend to think probably not for this build. I mean, I look at the other 2 ships. Do they need a bit more? Homing missiles on Vessery is also quite solid. Remember with Vessery as well, with missiles, you don't spend the target locks anymore. So you still get all the bonuses out of that, and then you could then spend the target lock and get it back, or not spend the target lock and then do it turn after turn. Vessery is going to have that unlocked pretty powerfully. Look, nothing jumps out at me as obvious. But then again, there's no bombs on Major Armor as well. Maybe you want to chuck a couple of bombs on there and do that kind of stuff. Just as a side note, I know this video is all about defenders, but TIE bombers having missiles and 2 different kinds of bombs and being costed as effectively they are, look really, really solid. Stay tuned, TIE bomber video coming up real soon. Oof, they look really good. I like Vessery just Duke though. Just having the conversation about that. 92 points, not quite as efficient as the Brath build we looked at in the last list, but really solid. And you can see how just one other ship that wants to get target locks, suddenly you have 2 pilots working together beautifully. Super offensive as well.
Oh, yeah.
Super offensive, which I guess is where the fifth brother logic comes out here. So, yes, thank you, Netter11, for submitting that one. We are in some interesting times, Justin.
We are. And I want to know, as the Imperial player, how the Imperials are going. So, let us know.
Absolutely. How do we break the TIE defenders? Are they just rubbish against E-Wings? Let us know in the comment section because we want to find out. In the meantime, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you want to have your list considered, put it down in the comment section below. If you're a patron, jump on the Discord and post them there. In the meantime, like and subscribe. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Reddit. Consider supporting the Patreon, and we'll catch you guys later on.
Bye.